Welcome back to the Built on Air podcast. It's good to be back with you after a month off. We are now starting season 16, episode 1 of the Built on Air podcast. Dan Feller's here with regular host Camille Parks and Ali Alosa. Good to see both of you back.
Hello.
Had eventful Septembers, I assume.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Very
yes,
good.
I have.
And Ali will have an eventful October with us.
I will. I'll be here as long as I can be here.
Yep.
But I am due on Halloween with my first baby. So exciting stuff.
So we may get a few more episodes with Ali. I assume you'll take some time off. I don't know. Maybe you'll be back the week after.
We'll see. I might not be able to stay away.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But good to have you both back. And we have special guest with us, Garrett. Good to have you, Garrett.
Thank you.
Good to have you on the show. We'll learn more about Garrett and his story later in the show. But I'll walk you through what we're going to be talking about today. As always, we will continue our normal format. We'll start with our round the bases of what's going on in Airtable. This month has been very active. Lots of stuff going on that we've got to talk about. And then we'll do a spotlight on OnToAir backups. OnToAir is now focused entirely on backups. We have a new screen for this season, and we'll talk about backups. And then we'll learn more about Garrett Logren. Is that how you say your last name?
It's close enough. Loughran is how
Loughran.
I've been told to pronounce it, but I'm not quite sure where that came from.
All right. We'll visit with Garrett, learn his story and how he found Airtable. Then Garrett's going to be walking us through a live example of how he uses Airtable in his day-to-day business and work. And then a shout out to join our community. And then finally, Camille's going to walk through using Airtable with N8N, if you've heard of that tool. NAN.io, I believe, is the website. And we'll do that. So let's kick off with our round the bases. All right. There was a somewhat interesting incident that happened middle of September. We got a message from the CEO of Airtable. I think this first hit Forbes, I think was where it first hit. Massive layoffs at Airtable, 237 people out of close to 1,000. So I think it was
27% or something like that. Something close.
Yeah, so massive layoffs, mostly impacting implementation specialists, salespeople, and really just doubling down, focusing on Airtable, how he makes it very clear of what their focus is going forward and focusing on enterprise customers. So, yeah, very, very unfortunate, sad to hear for those that were let go. And there is lots of reaction. I'll just quickly go through. We won't talk about all of them, but lots of reaction about that. Lots of discussion on the BuiltOnAir community. There was, that's not live anymore. Ben and Chris did a live show talking about it on the Facebook community. It was discussed on the Airtable forums. We'll talk a little bit about this later, but anyways, lots of discussion obviously everywhere. Thoughts, reaction when you heard this news?
Since the link's not live anymore, I watched it and might be able to paraphrase a little bit of what the Ben and Chris live stream was. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but what I recall from their sort of analysis is that, one, this isn't the first time Airtable has said, we're going to focus on enterprise. They said it last year, and I think it was also coupled with some layoffs, and this one was coupled with even more layoffs, and we're going to even more focus on enterprise. And so Chris was saying he wasn't really surprised in that, he's been saying it for a while now. They're going to gung-ho on enterprise, and Ben was saying this might end up being a blessing in disguise for the people on the consulting side in Airtable, meaning that, you can't get support from Airtable now if you're on the Teams plan, formerly known as the Pro plan. So who are you going to come to? The Airtable consultants. And so it's going to shift a lot of people to be more focused on that. They also sort of quelled some fears about the API limitations that were put on it. It was really kind of, it's their opinion and an opinion of many people that there's certain types of businesses that are going to be hit by the API limit, and a good majority of Airtable users, your day-to-day kind of folks, and the smaller sort of businesses that don't have a lot of third-party integrations are probably going to be fine with regard to the new API limitations. And so those were some of the sentiments thrown around. And of course, from a more negative side, it sucks when people lose their job. It's just not great that it was a considerable amount of people. There was talk on LinkedIn, all of the people who were recently laid off, but there's some good camaraderie in like the post Airtable alumni program. I'm just going to call it, because they all sort of are grouping together and trying to help each other refocus. So.
Yeah. Any other feedback?
Super sad. I know a lot of clients that this made them pretty nervous to see, especially on top of the layoffs that happened in December. I can only hope that we see some positives out of it somehow. But yeah, I feel for everybody that was laid off.
Yeah.
It feels like the positives are going to be on the side of, the enterprise level customers, because that's where they're saying they're going to put a lot of focus and effort into. There's got to be a lot of, in my opinion, improvements for Airtable as an enterprise product for me to take this with, the seriousness it might deserve, in that they've made improvements this year with Enterprise Hub and things like that for bulk user management. But as an enterprise product, there are several elements that are still lacking. And I feel like this move feels immature. Had they made more, not immature, premature?
Yeah.
Sorry, premature. Had they made some of those more improvements, improving it as a product for enterprise, this would have made more sense to me. Now it just feels like, we're going to focus on enterprise eventually. Well,
yeah.
There's some of the language there was a Forbes article where they had some quotes from Howie where it was a little like, okay, like they basically were like, we're not interested in the tens of thousands a year clients. We're interested in the $1 million a year clients. It's like, okay, well, I can understand that to a point, but to Camille's point, they're not quite, there's a lot missing for them to be a true $1 million a year enterprise product. Like a lot of security compliances and record limits. That's like huge. But hopefully we see those things start to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say to SMB business owners that are considering Airtable or on Airtable? What advice would you have to people in that kind of bucket as far as like using Airtable? And Garrett, maybe this is a question for you as somebody in that space. How does this make you feel long-term, stability-wise, comfort level?
I think with any software, any, service as a software, if you will, I get kind of nervous. Like I just assume it's not going to last like my entire career. So
Come to expect it.
Yeah. It's in a weird place for me, because it's not like Airtable is a poor product. It does a lot of things very well. And I think it's better suited for small business, even if that's not who their target customer is anymore. I think it is still a good product for launching and prototyping businesses and different workflows and things using Airtable. But it is unwise to put all of your eggs in one basket. because, in the world of tech, sometimes companies just disappear. I see we have some tabs lined up for the artist formerly known as Twitter, and sometimes companies make odd decisions. And so, if you're starting, if you don't already use Airtable and you're starting, I wouldn't discourage you from learning, but I would, advice from Bill French, who's a friend of the show, is to really think critically about what your business requirements are. What do you need for your business, and try to find the best tool or tools that get you to that point. A lot of the time it's going to be Airtable. Sometimes it's not going to be Airtable. And whatever you decide upon, make sure you got some contingencies in place in case they start saying things like this: we're not your target customer anymore. You want to be mobile, agile. And other quotes from, I believe I'm thinking of Remember the Titans.
Very good. Scott mentioned Steve Jobs knew the way to take over an industry was to focus on small businesses and individuals. iPhone took over enterprise from the bottom up. So anyways, lots of reaction. I know Chris, I also listened to the episode, and Chris kind of like settled down fears. He was like, I wouldn't worry too much. I think there will be clarity going forward, hopefully. So the next thing, I first saw this on, shout out to Table Forums, a great online source to see conversations about Airtable. And Bill French, who you talked about, Camille, he likes to pontificate often, and shout out to his blog and newsletter. If you want to get the latest from his brain, you should subscribe to that. But this kind of was an interesting take, and it led me down kind of a rabbit hole, and we'll talk a little bit about this. So he wrote a blog post talking about the financials of what's publicly available and what we know and what it might mean for Airtable. And so he references first the All In podcast, which is a very popular tech podcast of some venture capitalists and entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley world, talking about Airtable specifically and referencing a Twitter thread or an X thread from Anon, who runs CB Insights. So very, very influential financial person that is talking about this. And he ran an analysis based off of a number that he got from somewhere, that Airtable's ARR was 150 million. And based off of that number, did some analysis that basically showed that it may not even be worth, a tenth of what it was last valued at its last investment round, where it was valued almost at $12 billion. So there is some interesting back and forth here. If you go through this thread, lots of responses. This is somebody that, is influential in the world of investing. And so he got feedback from people. One of them was Max, who is actually on the board of Airtable, and basically said this is wildly inaccurate data, and sent him a DM to talk about it. So then Anon responded, and based off of that, gave some more updated information. Actually, this is, let's see, where's shoot, this is not the one. Yeah, he gives an updated analysis. Is it here? No, shoot. He did give an updated analysis using a number more around 300 million. So, but he doesn't say if he got that directly from Max. He says Max couldn't share specifics. So based off of the feedback that he got, I also saw comments in there from current Airtable employees saying that the numbers were wildly wrong. And so somewhere there's, numbers floating out there of what their numbers might be. But assuming based off of his updated that it might be closer to 300 million, that still gives a pretty high valuation, but not nearly as bad as the original analysis. So anyways, lots of discussion. There was another thread of somebody else who kind of gives a counter example based off of his understanding of secondary markets and where things are at. So anyways, lots of discussion in the Twitterverse, Xverse of where things are at, how bad it is, what the layoffs might be indicating as far as the stability of Airtable. So, and what their plans are, but nobody knows the truth. Nobody's come out definitively of where things are at, but quite a lot of discussion. If you like that stuff, feel free to follow all this on Twitter. We'll have the links, but also Bill French has a good write-up if you want to follow his discussions as well. And there's also some discussion on table forums. All right. Any comments on that? Any thoughts there?
Just interested to see what happens next.
If they're overvalued and want to match that valuation, you would probably want to go after very large contracts to sort of get the revenue, and that would be enterprise customers. So, from an outside perspective, I can see that logic in terms of, hey, we probably want to make more money. Let's go after enterprise clients, which they could have arrived at even if they were valued at what they are, how much they should be valued at, or whatever that is. Should feels weird in a financial sense, but they probably would have went that way eventually anyway, but they might have gone that way now because, maybe they want to hit certain numbers. And in order to do that, you need larger contracts.
Yeah. I think it's also an indicator of just, when they raised their funding, the markets were just crazy hot with just tons of cash flow being thrown at these companies. Notion, I know, also raised at a crazy valuation. And it was almost like free money to them, but there's no such thing as a free lunch. Like now it's coming back to where now they've got to live up to that target valuation that they raised at. And so they're trying to figure out how to live up to that number. And so that's just the reality of raising at that high of a price, and the money isn't flowing nearly as freely now. And so the revenue isn't coming, I'm sure, as easily as it was before. And so that's what led to all the changes. And I think we're going to see more of this in venture capital world in Silicon Valley. So, all right, let's move on. This was actually kind of a follow-up. There was actually some product updates, and this is just kind of one follow-up to the pricing. You kind of alluded to it, Camille, that the limits on APIs. One question is when are they going to start implementing this? And this has been asked a lot as far as how do we even track it? And basically the consensus is Airtable doesn't show you how many API calls you're actually using. And until they do, they're not going to really enforce it. So I think these are kind of considered soft limits unless it's being abused. That's kind of the language I've seen, is if somebody's really abusing it, then they might, shut it off, and because they have that clause now. But for the most part, I think people are safe in how they've been using it for now.
I wish they would just tell us, though, even if just now, before the limit is put in place, it's nice to track where your API calls are coming from too, because you might have hooked up several different services. And I was in a thread with, again, Bill French and others that were speculating if you had a website powered by Airtable using a portal software such as like Softer, or Glide or Stacker, et cetera, that's calling the API. How are they calling the API? Are they caching things so it's calling less often? When are they caching? Is it on every page load, or is it just on updates? Is there a stated refresh time? Some of that is probably buried somewhere in their text, but it's good to just log it and see, for my Airtable instance, I've done 200 calls today, and 100 are from Stacker, and 10 are from the different make scenarios I have, and blah, 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 blah. So, I would like that sort of visibility in the software now.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully they're thinking along those lines.
Yep.
All right. Okay, a couple feature. This one, I don't know if this is a bug or whatnot, but I've never seen this. So this is the attachment viewer was giving a view limit exceeded. I'd never seen a view limit on the viewer itself, and this file was only 18K. So something's weird here. This might have been a bug. I don't know, Marcus. If you're watching, let us know if you're still seeing this.
I hope that's a bug.
Yeah. I've never seen it before. I don't know what limit it could possibly be referencing. I'm baffled at this one.
Same.
Yeah, maybe this was like an add-on or something, like an extension, because that icon is not an Airtable icon. It's weird.
I like Bill's comment there after Marcus said, "Since when does this exist?" And since right now, apparently.
Yeah.
There's a new limit. You'll have to start tracking Camille in your database.
No, I don't want to.
Yeah, nobody else has seen it, so it's possible maybe it's coming from a Chrome extension or something. I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so we'll see if that keeps coming. All right, some new functionality. So this came out, the ability to change the primary field. So this is kind of cool. So if you right click on the primary field, there's now a change primary field option, and you can switch it. And it basically just swaps them and sets the new field as your first primary one on the left.
Yes. I think the previous workaround would have been to like duplicate the column, including the cell values, the column being your primary field, and then change your primary field to whatever you wanted it to be. And now you can do that. It doesn't change the field IDs. So you're working with the same column. They're just visually in a different order. And in Airtable fashion, small, seemingly random updates are sort of come in conjunction with other updates that kind of like rely on each other in something that I noticed somewhat recently. And I don't know if it's been pointed out yet. You can change an existing table, a regular table, into a synced table so long as the primary field is not a formula and it's not already being synced somewhere else. So in conjunction to this feature, if you have a primary field that's a formula, you can swap it out with something else and then change the whole table into a synced table. So two of those things somewhat recently added that can work together. This is like a quality of life improvement.
Interesting. Yeah, so that's definitely helpful, although not quite. Mel, you might be watching, wanted it to go deeper as far as how it's used in linked fields and whatnot. All right, I think we have one more, or we have a couple more. Array slice apparently is a new function that's now added, and there's documentation for it. Anybody use that yet?
I have. They previously added for lookup fields, include only the first or last, and then a variable number, oftentimes 1. So you can, of all the lookup or rollup values that you're going to receive, you can sort of shorten it down to some fixed number. Very useful if you are supposed to only see one value, but for whatever reason you're seeing multiple. You can now say, just give me the first one, or give me the last one, or alternatively, give me the first 6 if 6 was a valuable number to you. So very useful, but to Bill's point, still no split function, which would take a string and turn it into an array. We can only turn arrays into strings, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And no sorting either. Sorting would make this way more powerful.
Yeah.
I want there to be sorting, but there isn't.
Yep. Yeah, and I wish on top of I like how you can grab the most, the last or the first option in a lookup field, but I would love if you could like uniqueify them and say, just give me only the unique ones. Because sometimes
you can do array unique.
Certainly, but with a lookup field, I mean, because then you
Yes.
keep the look and feel of the like single select if you're looking that up, for example.
I feel as though that lookups and rollups should be the same. There's not much use to having two separate fields. You're just conditionally applying a formula. So I don't know. But yes, I would like to have unique lookups, and for both lookups and rollups, I would like to be able to sort.
Yeah. All right. What else we got? Russell brings up preview added to timeline settings. So now you can customize. Is this one that you talked about, Camille? Was this in your updates last season?
Yes. So there were updates to the timeline view that they've been slowly but surely adding just more and more to the timeline view. This was somewhat related. Previously in an interface, you could click on a timeline block, and if you had the timeline set to editable, it would show a little preview box of certain fields that were kind of like it was difficult to determine which fields it showed you in that little preview box. And if you clicked expand, it would open up a side sheet if you had that enabled. If you turned timeline editability off, the pop-up wouldn't show up and it would only open the side sheet, which is my preferred method. And then this came along that makes it easier to select which fields show up in the pop-up. My question underneath Russell's announcement is, can you turn it off entirely? You can if you set all of the fields to hidden. So it's useful. It just kind of happened out of nowhere. And so it kind of broke some of my workflows until I saw how to turn it off, because it's not really, it doesn't tell you that. You just have to hide them all and trust the system.
There you go. Good insights learned first here. I think we might have one more. So this one, Scott brings up searching in automations, and other people brought up other things that you could search for. Basically talking about if you're in automations looking for data, you can search by the field type. So you can type in checkbox or single select, and it will return all fields of that type. So I think it's been there a while, but good refresher.
Very nice.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. Okay, Meta API. This is one for developers. If you use the Meta API, they now have access to the formula information. And let's see, this was right at the end of August. So there we go, formula column type. So now you can actually get the entire formula value in the Meta API. So that's new. And it looks like there's even a new one I didn't see. Now returns the ID of the containing workspace. Actually, this is very useful. So if you're getting the base, it will give you the workspace ID. That's actually, I was looking for that a few weeks ago. So that is good to know. Some more meta information. All right, I think that ends it. Real quick, are you, this was a survey Hannah put together, color-coded options or standard gray? So when you're creating like multi-selects, do you just use all the gray colors, or do you create different colors for each option?
Color, for sure.
It depends on how many options. If it's like 7 or more, just gray, because then I want the colors to mean something. But if I have two very similar reds, what does that mean? Gray. If it's less or fewer, rather, I'll put some color. I'll try and make the colors relevant as well.
Yeah, I'm with Camille. If the colors indicate what, the option is, then colors are, to do or done. But if it's just random colors, no.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, I'm probably the same. It depends. All right, let's move on. We've got a busy show today, so we'll move on, but definitely lots of updates of what's new in the Airtable world. That's the latest on Round the Bases. We'll move on to OnToAir Backups. It's the premium solution to make sure that your data is backed up outside of Airtable, which is following best practices in the backup world. So for today, we're going to highlight, actually for the next couple of weeks, we'll highlight a new article put together by Hannah, who runs our marketing, on Airtable snapshots and everything you need to know about how Airtable uses snapshots. And so this is useful if you've never had to use snapshots. That's probably a good thing. Means you didn't, have bad data enter your workspace that you need to clean up. But this is all the tools and how you can use backups, and then also how you can use OnToAir if you want to restore from your data stored outside of Airtable, the ways that you can do that as well. But typically, using the snapshots is probably the easiest. Airtable has access to all your data, and so we actually recommend using that as your first starting point if you need to go back to historical data. But yeah, so check out OnToAir, ontoair.com, and make sure you're backing up your data using OnToAir. Okay, now we're going to learn about Garrett and how he came into this world of Airtable.
Awesome. Welcome, Garrett.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I've seen your name in a couple of the communities. I think that you're in the BuiltOnAir Slack. Is that correct?
I think I'm a member, but I don't
Awesome.
go on there often. But I do comment on the live stream quite often.
All right, that's where I've seen your name for sure. Awesome. How long have you been using Airtable?
Honestly, I don't even know. I think kind of when it first started, I was using Google Sheets and always kind of loved software, and I think I found it on Product Hunt one day and didn't really have a use case for it, just kind of was messing around and slowly started migrating some of the uses that I was using Google Sheets for, and kind of fell in love with it. A previous employer, I would pay for my own pro plan because I liked using it so much, even if it was just for me. So
awesome. And what industry is that you're using it in?
So we're a public works general civil engineering contractor. So what that means is like just when you see guys out on the road working, that's kind of what we do. And the public works sector is like, your counties, your cities, government agencies. So what I mainly use it for is to track projects we're bidding, because we do like competitive bidding. So the city or government will advertise a project on their website or in the newspaper back in the day. And pretty much if you have a contractor's license, you can bid on it. And
okay.
So there's really no set like place to kind of aggregate. There's a couple they're called plan rooms where they try to aggregate, but oftentimes I'm having to, supplement that by going to the city's website and trying to find project of interest. So
I used to be an urban planner, and I distinctly remember going after project bids, and some of them are directly on the city's websites, and you're based out of California, and so am I. we have a lot of different cities in California. So imagine having to check all of these different cities. And then there are certain websites that do aggregate, but it's like for anyone not in the industry, it's like if you were to apply to a job, some of them are on LinkedIn and some of them are just not somewhere.
Exactly.
And yeah, Airtable seems like a good place to put them all in. Is that something that you organized yourself, or was it like you guys kind of had something in Google Sheets and then, you kind of slowly but surely transitioned it to Airtable?
Yeah, I mean, like previous employers, some would just have a big whiteboard with jobs bidding. Some, there'd be a person, if let's say I found a job, just kind of email where like the information's found, and then one person would kind of put it in a Google Sheet or an Excel document, print it out daily and give it to all the estimators. But just there's kind of some general information that's needed, and just kind of I use those as the fields and slowly kind of mess around with it to my liking and kind of my use case.
Awesome. And are you sharing that like amongst your team so everybody can look at it every day, or?
Yeah, I have it synced to a calendar, so it's in all our calendars, because some of these jobs also require like what's called a walk. So, a week or so before the bids due, they'll meet at the site and kind of go over some specifics. And some of those are required, like mandatory. If you don't have someone attend that, they can't bid. So I have both the bid date and time, and then the kind of job walk, if you will, in calendars. And then I have a kind of a shared URL that I put in a folder at our office. And
that's super cool. Yeah, the synced calendar makes it super easy, so it just shows right up where you see it. Absolutely. Super cool. Are there any like limitations you ran into that you wish Airtable could solve, or has it checked all the boxes so far?
So, I mean, I'm sure there's some things here and there, but for the most part, it's limited by my time to, mess around with it and get it to its full capability. Because, for a while I had it emailing me, jobs within the next week that are bidding and stuff like that. And, just got kind of hectic, and my inbox got, pretty full pretty quick. So,
yeah. Yep.
Awesome. You ready to share with us what you've got?
Yeah. So first, I'm going to share.
Yeah. Hold on just 1 second. I'll get us back there. So Garrett's going to walk us through his live base on using Airtable to bid on public works projects. So I think you still need to share your screen again.
So first, I'm going to share kind of a typical city's website of jobs. This is City of San Luis Obispo, and they post, jobs out to bid here. So we'll have to come check, and this water line replacement project. So it'll take us kind of the information, job name, how much time's left, date and time, just all this information. And
I think you might be sharing just the one screen, so we might not be seeing.
Yes, it opened in a new tab. Hold on.
There we go.
There we go. So job name, time left, all this, where you can download the plans and the specifications. So I'll have to take this, and I'm going to present my other. So here's the base. Now we do bid sometimes as a sub or to, like developers. My previous company was like all public works, we never bid to developers, but the company I'm at now. So I've been kind of migrating some things and adding things, but so I got, these kind of tabs, I call them, stuff we're behind on. Usually this is as a sub, because you can call them and say, hey, I can't get it this Friday. Can I have till Monday? But as far as public works jobs goes, so let's see, a typical one would be, let's say this job, this Measure K 14 street rehab. So to start, I have a form to add bid. I'm not going to open it because it will open in a new tab, but put in the project, bid date and time, the type, who it bids to, like the agency, location, just any remarks, like, I don't know, the engineer's phone number if we have questions. EE stands for engineer's estimate. So they will have internally estimate how big the job is. And then this is if one of those pre-bid walks, if it's required or not. Sometimes they have optional ones, mandatory or none. And then that's conditional if there is one, date and time, location. And then the URL, I feel like this is the most important field. So back on that one I was showing you, put the URL here. Attachments, if there's, sometimes I'll put the plans and specs in there, but oftentimes I'll just save it to the computer. And from there, it goes to, it automatically gets grouped into this bidding stage. So like I was saying, this job, I don't know, can you guys see that better?
Yeah. Thank you.
So date and time, the city of Grover Beach, public works job. So the engineer's estimate on that one's 1.85 million, no pre-bid. And then on that remarks, I kind of put just what they had as kind of the project description. And then the attachments, the plans, the specifications, and then the URL. I clicked it and it took me here. So the reason it's important to have this, if there's any addendum, so like changes to the project, let's say someone asked a question like, oh, the plans are missing a page. They'll put an addendum, and when the job bids, if you don't, acknowledge these addendums because they're actual contract changes, then your bid's thrown out. Mm-hmm. This is where they post those addendums. So check a day before the bid or, the day of the bid, make sure I got all the addendum and stuff like that.
Man, I'm taken back. It's been years.
I don't know if I'm going too fast. Interestingly enough, so this bid date and time, if you're 10 seconds late, they'll throw your bid in the trash. Mm-hmm. If you're $1 over the low bid guy, let's say Camille's bid is $10 and I'm $11, they'll, as long as she's has her license and stuff checks out, they will award it to her, even though I've been doing this forever and everybody in this town knows me. It doesn't matter because it's all public funding and
it's price of right rules.
Exactly.
If they give you a number, hit that number or go below it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to what you had said before. You talked about the difference between if it's an all public works job or if you're applying as a sub. in the industry, that would mean there are, for larger projects that include things other than public works, you might assemble a team of companies, one that focuses on public works like yours, another one that's urban planners like formerly me, one that might be architects, blah, 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 blah. Certain big companies might have all of those things in-house, but if you don't have them in-house, you might go in for a project as a lead, or you might go in for a project as a sub-consultant. So in the instances where you're going after a project as a sub-consultant or a sub, is this something that you share with your external partners, the people who are not in your company, but in your co-consultants? Because getting everybody an Airtable license would be, expensive pretty quickly, especially if they're only going in on one of these several projects with you.
Yeah, so kind of to relate to that, so I'm what's called our lead estimator, and we have another gentleman in our office who he kind of gravitates towards. We do a lot of concrete, sidewalk, curb and gutter. So his name's Tito. So I literally have something that's just kind of geared towards jobs he needs to be on the lookout for. Once, I need his help on. So I guess he's kind of my consultant. So I'll print this. He's not super tech and computer savvy, so twice, 3 times a week I'll print this, which it's mostly the same information, but little less. I have this extra notes one for him if there's anything specific. This Plan Swift, this is our kind of estimating takeoff software, so I'll put the job in Plan Swift for him to be able to do his takeoff. So I have quite a few to throw in there, as you can see. But yeah, so that's kind of how I would share it. As far as other contractors, no, because it'll be just one job that we might be working on together. There are certain companies we do a lot of work with, but it's project by project basis.
This is awesome. We love seeing real world examples of how you're using it. Have you explored interfaces at all, or are you still mostly working in the grid view?
I do. I don't know if I want to even click that because I feel like every base I have is a work in progress.
That never stops. It's fine.
Yeah, I did want. Do I have another 2 minutes, maybe?
Sure.
Okay, real quick, because this is what I'm working on now, and it is. So there's estimating software that costs $1 bajillion.
Mm-hmm.
The sun's kind of coming up. This is my estimating software I've been using for about 6 months now. So kind of the workflow, go from the project, bid schedule. Sometimes, they'll have the base bid, like everybody, this is what the job's going to be. And then they'll add alternates like, if we have extra money, we'll go do this too. So if there's multiple bid schedules, then it goes to bid items. So in the bid forms, there'll be items you bid against. Typically number one's the mobilization, getting you there. And then, this one, for example, this wood fence, they'll quantify it. So the engineer came up with 45 lineal feet of fence to be replaced. So I'll get that in there. And then the bid cost, this is the main one. I got it grouped by bid items. So let's go that wood fence and activity. So when you build a fence, you need to get the materials. So that'll be, materials. And then, we need wood. right? And did I not add that? There it goes. And it's not updating.
Looks like
So
it's
you put your resources in, and then you can apply costs and like your markup values. And this is what I've been using to kind of estimate, and kind of stole, some ideas from some big estimating software.
Very cool. You replaced an expensive piece of software with Airtable. Nice. All right. Thank you, Garrett, for showcasing that and seeing how you're using that in the real world. Always appreciate that. Let's move on. Quick shout out to join our community. BuiltOnAir.com/join gets you in. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd love to see you join our Slack community as well. Lots of experts in there. With that, Camille is going to walk us through some automation fun.
Yes. I have a pretty long workflow. This is just sort of the first part of it. And a lot of it is built using N8N, which is a open source and self-hostable automation builder. It's very similar to Make or Integromat if you're used to those. If you're not used to those, it's like Zapier, but more sort of visual. So on this screen, you can kind of see what it looks like. It's a sort of linear process. And I wanted to try it out. And so I built a somewhat complex workflow, that being a concept I've thought of for a watch list. So Garrett talked about a little bit earlier, he had this workflow that he disabled, but at one point you had a running sort of digest of here are the different projects that are coming up in a week or something like that. And what I wanted was a way to create watch lists very easily and sort of programmatically. It's really easy in Airtable if I have a base that's I have one date that I want to keep track of. Email me any of those dates that's coming up in a week. It's more difficult if you have like 10 different fields that you're trying to track. It's even more difficult if 5 people need these 5 fields, and then these 5 people need these other 5 fields, and some of those overlap. That's difficult. It's even more difficult if each person wants 1 email per day rather than 1 email per project. And it's even more difficult to say, here's what the values are now, here's what the values used to be in the case of a field being updated. So to solve all of those sort of complexities, I've created a workflow that is sort of based on having a meta table. This is a base that kind of exists by itself, separate from the tables that I'm watching, where I'm saying I want to track these 3 different things: all dates associated with a project, the recording date, and the release stage. So I'm filling in the base I'm watching, the table, and then the fields. You can see in this case, I'm tracking 3 different date fields. This one is just 1 field, and this is this is just another field in that theme table. I have a button that will take me to the relevant table based on whatever ID I put in here. You can see I'm using one of Airtable's templates for a podcast studio. And, here's all of our different episodes. Here's who's going to be the hosts of that episode, the producer, and the editor. So for a practical example, if one of my dates is the recording date, right, the hosts are going to want to know when they're recording, and the editor probably wants to know when their due date is, which might be a cut due date, etc. The producer probably cares about all of those dates because they're producing the episode. And the producer and editor might care about the stage it's in, whether or not it's been released or made just scheduled. The host probably doesn't care. They just want to know when they need to record by if they're not one of the editors or producers. just as a practical example. So the first part of this sort of overview, and I can post the very specific information about these different workflows, is the part in Airtable that is creating a webhook. So in order to do this programmatically, Airtable has a API that lets you create webhooks that listen for particular events. In this case, I care when any of those fields have been updated, not necessarily when a record is created. And so this N8N scenario is waiting for a trigger to happen, in that case, a webhook being called, and then it's going through a process of looking at this watch list record. Let's take the first one as an example. And I've pointed out, here's the base and table and the fields I'm watching. And it's all sort of triggered by one of these two buttons. Test, which will just sort of test the workflow in N8N, and create/edit, which will run the workflow entirely. So just sort of talking through what this workflow is doing. This is going to look somewhat similar to Make if you're used to it. I know Scott is in the audience, who's an expert in Make, so this might look somewhat familiar to him. If I sort of zoom in, the first thing it's doing is it's checking if the webhook ID is empty or not, and that's stored here in my Airtable record. So if it's not empty, just sort of refresh the webhook. In Airtable, webhooks expire after 7 days. You have to continuously, refresh them in order for them to stay active. If it is empty, I want to search through the watched table and see, are there any webhooks associated with that table? Maybe I just forgot to put in the ID. And so I'm splitting apart whatever was found into an array, and then I want to filter down any webhooks associated with that table and see if any of them match the conditions I've set. So when you're setting up a webhook in Airtable, you're telling it what fields do you care about. In this case, it's this list that I've provided. If there are no webhooks for that table that are watching just those 3 fields, then I need to create a webhook. If not, then I need to, or if there is one already, then I need to take that webhook ID and associate it with this Airtable record in my meta table so I can keep track of it. So in the event that it needs to create a webhook, what it's doing, and there might be, a better way to do this. What I found works best in for this use case is just to delete existing webhooks that match the the conditions I'm looking for. In the case of when I was testing all of this, I ended up making like 15 of the same webhook. So this was sort of put in here to delete all of them because I only need one, and then when I'm done deleting, just create the one that I need and then attach the webhook ID to the Airtable record. So that's what that process is doing. This up here is just for testing purposes, which is why they're all disabled, which is something I like. In N8N, I am able to sort of temporarily turn off different nodes in a workflow. So I don't need to do any of this replacing webhook business. That's really only for the purposes of me testing out this scenario. So very quickly, I'm going to do a demo and hope it works. So I'm going to delete this webhook ID, and then I'm going to do create and /edit. It's going to open up a new tab, which I don't necessarily need to look at. It's going to return all of this gobbledygook, which I don't really need. Much like in Make or Integromat, you can control what that webhook response page looks like. I didn't need to because I'm the only one who's going to see it. So I just know to get rid of it. If I go to my executions tab, I will see that this just fired, and I'll walk through what it did. So it was triggered when I clicked that button. It saw that the webhook ID was empty because I deleted it. Then it was searching through that watch table, finding all of the different webhooks associated with that table. There were 3 items that were hooked into that table. All 3 are those 3. Then it filtered down which of those existing webhooks match the fields that I'm watching. There's only one, as there should be. And because there's only one, fill in the webhook ID with the one that exists. And so you could see it was repopulated. If it didn't find any, it would have just created a new webhook. If it found too many, 2 or more, it would have deleted both of those and created just one to replace it. So that's what this alternate branch is. And the next time I sort of go over this workflow, we'll talk about it actually logging field changes and sending those out via email to the associated persons.
Very cool. This is awesome. I haven't, I think I tried this out when it first came out, but it's come a long ways.
It is much better than a lot of the promotional material shows. A lot of the older, like a year plus demos had like a start trigger that was just always there, and then whatever trigger it should actually be, in this case, a webhook response as a separate node. They got rid of that. So don't be discouraged, I would say, by some of the things you might find in some of the tutorials that you might come across. I think it is a much better product than it used to be. And so far, I really like it. It handles arrays differently than Make. So there's a little bit of a learning curve if you're coming from that world, but I think it is super useful. And I like a lot of the different pre-built nodes that they have. And I'll leave it there.
Awesome. And we'll do part 2 in a future episode. So a little cliffhanger appetizer for you. Thank you, Camille and Ali and Garrett. Thank you for joining. Grateful to have you on and learn more about yourself and your business and how you're using Airtable. Look forward. We'll get an update from you sometime in the future.
I can't
So
see
with
you
that,
guys.
yeah. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you, guys.
That concludes today's show. We'll see you next week for episode 2. Take care, everyone.
Bye.